Well, joining me now to have a further look at today's papers is broadcaster and barrister Andrew Eborn. Morning, Andrew.
Good morning, James. Very bright and very early.
Indeed. Always appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on the programme. Let's start with that case of Lucy Letby. I mean, truly horrific, this case. But this call from Labour to change the law to force criminals to appear in court for sentencing. I'm sure everyone absolutely understands the emotion behind that. But from a practicality point of view, how feasible do you think it is?
Well, it's very interesting, and it does raise that question because the Victim Personal Statement Scheme was introduced in England and Wales under the Victims' Charter back in 1996. And the whole idea was to give the opportunity to victims and their families to explain how the crime has affected them. Now, obviously, Letby, calculating, cunning, cruel, cowardly, all sorts of words thrown about her refusal to come to court and face the families effectively for her crimes and the change in the law as a result. But there's a couple of issues on this. Is one, the people concerned, the guards and so on and so forth, are sometimes concerned for their own safety if they force a prisoner to come into court. And there's also the issue about would the victims and their families actually get what they expect? Because sometimes the people who have been convicted don't give the response. They don't suddenly burst into tears and show remorse and so on and so forth. Some people who have been convicted could actually mock the families, and it could make the situation far worse. So there are lots and lots of issues. I personally believe it does need to be looked at. I personally believe that we should use technology far more. So you can get, for example, a feed to the cells so you can see the person who's been convicted, see their reaction, and vice versa, because the families themselves, they said they wanted the criminal to see the effect on them. So we could have a two-way camera system. I do think it needs to be properly debated and all sides considered, but it is a harrowing case. And as more and more evidence emerges, it becomes more and more harrowing and questions need to be answered.
Yeah, I think Robert Buckland, the former Justice Secretary, made that point about whether technology is the best way of doing it, because you're right, it would be truly horrific if a criminal attended their sentencing and then decided to disrupt proceedings. That could be even more traumatic for the families. The other issue some people raise is that, in some cases where you've got a criminal facing sentence, you can incentivize them to attend by saying that it'll be taken into account in the sentencing. But in extreme cases like the Lucy Letby case, where you have a whole life sentence, nothing is going to change her mind, because you're not going to reduce the sentence just because she turns up.
Well, there might be certain privileges you get when you're inside. There are all sorts of things that you can look at to incentivize, if you like, people to do it. But it also, the other thing is understanding what life sentences mean. And normally what happens in murder is compulsory that people get a life sentence. But it may be that they specify a minimum term that they spend in prison. There's a sort of tariff, and it becomes more and more evident about how this process works. We had the first televised case on 28th of July 2022 when Judge Sarah Munro QC passed her sentencing with Ben Oliver. And the whole idea was that justice should not just be done, but should be seen to be done to understand that process. So the way that it works for murder is it's obligatory they get a life sentence. In certain cases, it will be for a minimum term, after which the offender will basically be considered for parole, sometimes called the tariff. But what happens in very severe cases, what they do is pass an all-life sentence. And obviously this is one of the most horrendous cases, and the judge in the Letby case said it's got to be whole life. There is no basically time out for good behaviour or otherwise.
And it would seem the government coming under increasing pressure to have a judge-led inquiry, a statutory inquiry into the circumstances around Lucy Letby's crimes. At the moment, they've announced a non-statutory one, seemingly because the argument in favour of that is it takes less time, and so you can get on with it more quickly. But a lot of people are saying the downside of that is you cannot compel witnesses to come forward. What would you do, Andrew?
Well, I would get as much information as possible. And what happens in this case, there's still apparently some inquiries, there might be further charges, I understand, and so on and so forth. I would speed up the process. There's no reason why all sorts of inquiries can't take place in a very quick sort of way. People want to find out what mistakes have been made, what can be prevented in the future. And with all these cases, the sooner that can be done, the better. But we do need to have this sort of transparency about what processes are in place when questions are asked about the media. I mean, this is the problem with a lot of stories, is that these cases take a long time to try. There's a tremendous amount of evidence which the jury hear, which we in the media can only report little snippets about. But what we need to do, there are lots of these questions. So I think all of those in the relevant positions of power need to ensure that this is done as quickly as possible.
Meanwhile, in other news this morning, cancer back in the headlines after the radio presenter Chris Evans revealed he's been diagnosed with skin cancer. Talking on his Virgin Radio show yesterday, thankfully he says it should be treatable, and obviously we send him all our best wishes. But also interesting, the Times this morning reporting that all middle-aged men could be offered MRI scans to check for prostate cancer, which would be a massive thing, Andrew.
Oh, absolutely massive. And I think looking at that sort of side, if you put it into context, 1 in 8 men will develop prostate cancer, and the disease kills about 12,000 a year. And all credit to Chris Evans for talking about his skin cancer and reassuring people about what they can do. Prevention is always much, much better than cure. And all praise also to the wonderful James Whale. I was on his show over the weekend. You might recall that he had kidney cancer in 2000, had a kidney removed. And then in 2020, he revealed it spread to his spine, brain and lungs. And all of the people in the public eye who are happy to talk about these sort of things, it does give lots of hope to others. And I think what we need to do with these sort of medical stories, we do need to look at the seismic changes that are being made in medicine. And I think that the idea of offering everybody an MRI scan to just to check for prostate cancer has got to be good. And the other great thing is I'm passionate about embracing technology and the power of artificial intelligence to change our world. And another great report in the Times today talks about these eye scans which can spot Parkinson's disease 7 years before symptoms. So there are lots of good stories. Our thoughts obviously go out to Chris and James and others who are suffering, but all credit to them for speaking about it, because it will give others hopefully the courage to get themselves checked where they can do early, to look out for those sort of symptoms. And as I say, prevention is better than cure, but there is hope for some on the horizon.
Meanwhile, page 3 of the Times this morning, more coverage of the Lionesses after the World Cup final at the weekend, of course. Not the result we were hoping for, but interestingly, there's a growing campaign for Nike, who are the England shirt manufacturer, to release a replica kit for Mary Earps, the England keeper, who pulled off that brilliant save in the final. 73,000 people have now signed this. It's a bit amazing, Andrew, that Nike haven't bowed to pressure on this. I would have thought if 73,000 people are signing a petition saying, look, we want to buy a Mary Earps shirt, surely that's enough commercial demand. Now, maybe all 73,000 are not actually going to go out and buy one, but still, it's a bit weird.
I think you're absolutely right, James. And what they should have done, all the 72,000, next to where they can sign their name, they should also put a little space for putting your credit card details, because then certainly would have turned around and done it. But all credit to the Lionesses. It was wonderful. We were very sad about the 1-0 loss to Spain, but they are wonderful. And Earps, 30, she was awarded keeper in the tournament, and she says herself, and understandably, she's hugely disappointed by the decision not to sell replica shirts. What's happening? David Seaman's also come in, former goalkeeper. He posted on Twitter, now X, I bet Nike are regretting not selling the Mary Earps shirt now. And I think it's always going to happen on that sort of basis. These are commercial decisions. And what Nike have said in their credit, and to put a bit of balance here, is we hear and understand the desire for a retail version of a goalkeeper jersey, and we are working towards solutions for future tournaments. The FA and Nike did not respond to requests for further comment, says the Times article.
And what is also very funny, on page 3 of the Times, they've got some photos of Ed Davey, Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak all watching the football over the weekend, or in recent times. And there seems to be a growing trend for politicians deciding they want their PR teams to take photos of them watching the game, either in an England shirt, and in the Ed Davey case, I think they slightly knowingly photoshopped an England shirt onto him. But it's a bit weird. Do we need to see photos of our political leaders watching the game? OK, if they like football, great, but the rest of us don't take photos of ourselves in the pub cheering awkwardly.
Well, it's a vote winner, they think, and there was a wonderful cartoon in the Sunday Times as well, with the Liberal Democrats and everybody and Rishi and Keir all chasing the Lionesses, offering their support on the basis that this could well get a vote. But I do think, and there's a couple of things. Well, firstly, Rishi didn't go out there, which is a real shame. I also think it's a real shame that Prince William didn't go out. And I've heard a couple of reasons which were given for this. Some suggested that the real reason was because King Charles himself has not yet visited Australia since the death of his mother, Elizabeth, which means that William couldn't go before his father visited the Commonwealth. And others speculated that flying halfway around the world for a short visit would damage his green credentials, given his support of the Earthshot Prize and so on and so forth. I do think, however, as president of the FA, he should have been there cheering the Lionesses on. And they were brilliant. And I tell you what, the skill level of football, which I saw displayed in the various matches, was phenomenal. In the final match, did you watch it yourself, James?
I did watch it. I did watch it, and I thought, I mean, hats off to Spain. They were the better team on the day. Yeah. But the Lionesses across the tournament, I think, probably were the best team in the tournament.
Oh, I have to say, the fact that we got the Golden Gloves Award, I think that's fantastic. Matt's got a wonderful cartoon in today's Telegraph. He said, I had that nightmare again. Some women are playing football in the park. The ball accidentally rolls towards me, and I have to kick it back to them. There's a couple of guys in the pub. Football is coming home, 1966, but it's the women who are bringing it, and all credit to them. And what I love as well, James, is that they are inspiring a new generation of girls to get out and play football and exercise, and that's got to be good for the nation.
Brilliant cartoon this morning on page 23 of the Times Morning cartoon about Donald Trump, who is refusing to take part in the Republican primary debate. I mean, in a way, why should he? Because he's so far ahead, he's only got everything to lose, hasn't he?
Well, he has. It is that brilliant cartoon. There's him sitting on that wonderful chair just outside the White House with wonderful steps saying, is the party suggesting there is something to debate? He says, there's lots of people bowing down to him. And he's right, isn't he? He sort of turns out he's shunned the TV Republican presidential debates for his own brand. He's so already far ahead in the polling. What on earth does he need to have a debate with the others for? So he's offered instead to have an interview with everybody's favourite Tucker Carlson, the former Fox News anchor, as a rival attraction to tomorrow night's debate hosted by Fox News. And I'll tell you what, I reckon the viewing figures for that will be fairly impressive.
Yes, absolutely. And then just finally, we should also mention this morning, Andrew, the best jokes of the Edinburgh Fringe have been announced.
Oh, we love it. And well done. Funniest jokes of the Edinburgh Fringe. And one person's guffaw may not be...
Yes, some are better than others.
Some certainly are. So what happened is the panel, which was decided by Digital Television Dave, they gave the prize to Lorna Rose Treen as the comedian who cracked the funniest joke. And the joke was, I started dating a zookeeper, but it turned out he was a cheetah. There you go. That was the winner this year. And what's interesting, in second place went to Liz Gutter-Bock, glorious name, with her gag, the most British thing I've ever heard, a lady who said, well, I'm sorry, but I don't apologise. Well, very good. And in bronze this year was Amos Gill, who said, last year I had a great joke about inflation, but it's hardly worth it now.
You see, they're okay. My two favourite on the list are number 6, which is from Frank Lavender, which is how do celiac Germans greet each other? Gluten Tag. And number 7, my friend got locked in a coffee place overnight. Now he only ever goes to Starbucks. Not the rivals. He's claustrophobic.
I know, I love the claustrophobic joke. And what I love about that, it ties in with the Victoria's cake. The 183-year-old slice of Victoria's wedding cake has gone on sale today with an estimated value of £300. So I wonder if you can have that wonderful cake. And the report that we're drinking more coffee than tea, which they say in the Star, you can have this Victoria cake to go with it. It's got to be good.
Andrew, always great to chat. Thank you so much. That's broadcaster and barrister Andrew Eborn with a look at this morning's papers.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.